Gentrification. What is it? How it happens, and do we like it or not? Well, in the end, this is the question. Do we like gentrification or not? And is it so bad or not? First, what is gentrification? Of course, everybody knows it's that process in which the former poor inhabitants of former poor parts of a city are just kicked off by new inhabitants who are richer and who are hipster and who just somehow conquer those former old parts of the city and just transform them into posh, rich, expensive places where to work and to live. Gentrification happens everywhere, almost everywhere, but mainly we have experience of gentrification in Europe. As in Europe, there are a lot of situations where it can easily happen. Well, first of all, gentrification is not something that can happen everywhere. To have a gentrification process, you need to have very specific places, because they have to be rotten, they have to be half abandoned, they have to be full of poor people, they have to be cheap, but they have to be nice. They have to be be somehow part of the life of the city. Like they can be central neighborhoods which have been abandoned or for years, or they should be neighborhoods close to the water. You know, when there's water, there's always something nice. Or they have to be places with a heritage or historical relevance. So, gentrification is not something which can happen in every abandoned peripheral neighborhood. So imagine that you have this space. Now we are here in Athens. We're close to Exarchia, which is a neighborhood which is under gentrification, and it is central. It is central. It is central. It has been left without any specific investment from the big investors, because it's kind of a symbol of the counterculture. It has been a vivid place, and so nobody really cared about what was happening in Exarchia, but it's central. And now it's under gentrification. And well, gentrification is not something which happens from one day to another. Usually people refer to gentrification as to the last part of a longer process. Well, for us, gentrification is the whole process. So the process starts when a part of the city gets abandoned. A part of the city which was previously used by citizens, then is abandoned for many different reasons. So that's the part when the neighborhood goes down, becomes cheap. It becomes cheap and becomes somehow the place where poor people go because it's cheap. And when you have a cheap, half-abandoned neighborhood full of poor people, well, of course, you start to have a lot of problems. It's normal, but they usually are problems which are local problems of poor people who interact with other poor people in a poor neighborhood. Nobody really cares about this. But then there are, those are nice places, there are nice neighborhoods, and so there are some other people who say, okay, but it's such a shame that nobody's doing anything interesting there. And it's so cheap, it's so beautiful. And so they start to do artistic projects, and there are artists who put them their studios because it's cheap, and there are people who go there to dance, or there are people who go there to sing, and there are small informal bars. And so there's this underground movement, mainly driven by art and artists, music, and which is somehow which happens in parallel with the local community. So there are people who come from outside, who go there, who sing, and then come back home, and it's something which usually takes place during the night, because in those places, in those neighborhoods, at first nightlife is interesting because there are a lot of strange people and a lot of cultural events, and well, yes, they are mainly counter-cultural events, but which is the difference between culture and counterculture. It's just another kind of culture. So they are vivid places, and so then more people start to come to enjoy this nightlife and to enjoy these cultural events. Students and from other neighborhoods and other people who want to find the cheap accommodation start to say, okay, maybe living here is not so bad, and like students from university, and so you have a lot of people who decide to go there. Not really a lot, but enough people to attract the interest. The interest of who? The interest of the huge speculators, the huge companies, the huge real estates, and they know that something is going to happen, and they buy everything. They buy everything. They buy blocks, not just apartments. They buy entire blocks, and they don't do anything. Really, they don't do anything. They just wait, and so while they wait, slowly, you have a lot of people who come from those other neighborhoods who started to do stuff, and you have also some activists who come there because they understand that the local community is weak and they need help. So you have activists, artists, and a local community made out of poor, weak people. Of course, after one point, there is some clash. And mainly because, of course, if you have a poor neighborhood with no huge control by authorities, and you have poor people and medium-rich people, this also attracts some kind of urban crime, and they start to become unsafe places where to go during the night. And then tension rises and rises and rises. And this is another phase of the gentrification. The tension rises, and then bad things happen. Bad things happen, but there's someone who just let them happen, or there's someone who is not able to avoid them to happen, but they happen. And so then the problems and the violence, which was before just within the poor neighborhood and nobody really cared about it, now is a problem of the whole city, because there are attacks against students who belong to medium-high families, and so people start to ask for an intervention, and the intervention comes, and there are public investments, and they just clean up the neighborhood, and most of the counter-anarchist, strange people, they are just pushed away from that area, and then they say, okay, but there was a lot of people in there, there was some potential, and that's when the temporary projects start. Yes, because those who own those blocks just give them for free, or almost for free, or just for very low rent to people who want to establish their temporary projects. Usually they're NGOs, associations, people dealing with culture, and of course also private private companies who want to open bars, restaurants. That's a phase where those areas are not as wild as before, but they're still interesting for tourists, interesting for students, because they're so colorful, they're so fresh. That's the hipster phase, when with all the bars inside of the containers, things like that. And in that phase, what happens is that those neighborhoods start to become a little bit safer, and so there's a second wave of people who think they could go there and live there. Professionals, architects, people working in graphics, artists, and they buy houses there, and they establish their studios there because it's cool, because it's the place to be in town. Well, also this is a phase of gentrification. Of course, those people don't really self-perceive as part of the gentrification process because they want to interact, they want to feel the taste of the original flavor of the neighborhood. They want to buy things at local shops. But what happens is that year after year, you have more people who spend more, who invest more in these neighborhoods, and prices start to rising. And you have a lot of middle class people, small burghers or medium burghers, and they go there because they work in those NGOs, they work in associations, and they work with poor children in the neighborhood, and they bring new models, they experiment new models, and of course prices go up. At one point, the temporary events, the temporary shops, the temporary reuse of spaces just quit. And those huge investors now have they have a market. They have a market requiring better, bigger, more expensive accommodations, more expensive shops, more expensive offices. And they just demolish everything and build new houses, luxury houses, with underground parking lots filled with electric plugs for all electric cars, and then you have a high level, usually leftish population, high earning, high spending, and that's how gentrification ends. But well, for us, what is interesting is that the gentrification is not just this last part. The part when rich people come and the old inhabitants, the poor people, have to go away. The gentrification is the whole process, starting from the beginning. So, of course, spontaneous movements of artists, people who go there and sing, and the freedom of the first years, and even the temporary use of spaces are good because they give space and give a moment for people to experiment. But we have to keep in mind that even at the beginning, even those phases are phases of gentrification, and we are all involved in this gentrification process. And this doesn't mean that we don't have to renew, reuse, reshape neighborhoods, but this means that since the beginning we have to find a way to save some spaces, to save some cultural don't want to say bubbles, but some cultural, like rocks, which have to stay there and stand. If it's everything just so easy to vanish, if everything is so temporary, then we can't have a long-term impact. And all the new ideas, all the new concepts, all the experiments that we do will be lost just because they are temporary. So we could think to the gentrification process in a more ambitious way, not call it gentrification. We can understand that if there are huge investors, they want to have something back, but they should be somehow forced to leave some areas to those who are experimenting and to those who are really creating something new for the whole community and who want to settle down and to make it a long-lasting project. So experimentation is good because when you experiment you can also fail, but what is not failing then should have a long-term house, should have a long-term place where it can keep on doing and keep on growing. Gentrification so is bad in the way it is now, of course, yes, but nobody is exempted from the responsibility of being part of this process. If we want to really fight against gentrification processes, we have to stand up for long-term spaces given to the better projects in that neighborhood and for long period, 40 years, 50 years.